Our regrets are stories we tell ourselves. When you constantly worry about your past, you're supporting that belief in your present. We were curious about what would happen if we tried to release those worries and rewrite our stories. So we decided to do an experiment.
What happens if we dedicate time to relieving our regrets? This is a show where we take a moment to reveal the messy bits about ourselves without judgment. It's a show where we can reflect, learn, grow, and maybe even laugh about our actions, attitudes, and behaviors. It's a place where we can speak about our past and learn from it. Join us on the journey.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our podcast. My name is Victoria Mirborcia, and I am one of your co-hosts along with my friend
Shadoe Ball.
Shadoe Ball here as well.
It's the spooky episode. It's
welcome, everybody. How's it going, Shadoe?
It's pretty good. I started my day with some tea, and then I put like the tea bags on my eyes. You know that trick to help.
I don't know what that trick is. What's it for?
Oh, it at least for me, it helps brighten my under eye circles a little bit. And just makes me feel more awake after I drink my tea. But then during that, I also put on a meditation. So I put on a 15-minute meditation and had my tea bags on my eyes. And it was a meditation all about getting yourself into the present moment. So a really good one if you're feeling untethered or you have lots of floating thoughts. It really helps, especially today is a Monday. So I like starting my week with this meditation. So I would say because of this meditation, even though I've had a couple of bumps throughout the day already, I'm still feeling pretty good, like an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. How about you?
Okay, I have one question. I'm still caught up on the tea bags.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I do love meditation, everybody. I run a letting go meditation class on Fridays, which we'll tell you about in the episode notes. So I want to hear more about the meditation that you do.
Yeah.
However, the tea bags. Okay. So are they is it black tea or herbal tea?
No, just my regular old Tetley orange pico.
I feel like that would stain your skin around your eyes.
No, at least not for me. I don't know. I find it gives me brightness. And especially the puffiness and everything. It helps. Yeah.
I want to know. Maybe I want to know the science.
Yeah.
I want to know the science behind that. I'm going to look into it. We'll report back later, listeners.
Yeah, really maybe. Curious. Yeah, maybe our listeners will be it does stain, or other listeners will be I've done. Yeah,
let us know. We'll do a post on our Instagram about it and comment. Let us know, listeners. I've heard the cucumbers on the eyes.
Sure.
But I've never heard of the tea bags. So do you know what I have heard of the tea bags for though? Like a black tea bag, like Tetley tea or red rose, because we're good Canadians here. For cold sores.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. There's something in the tea that so maybe it's the same thing. I don't know. We got to figure it out. If anybody out there knows, let us know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I could be totally wrong. And again, for me, it is not necessarily about the looks of it. It is it's just a really enjoying. For me, I really enjoy the feeling of it, and it's especially I woke up kind of congested today, but not sick, just kind of lots of. I did a lot of cleaning this weekend, so there was a lot of dust in my sinuses and stuff. So that hot kind of tea bag on the eyes.
I can see how it would be soothing. Yeah, I can see. I totally. And then the smell of it too. It's a soothing smell if you're a tea drinker.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
So yeah, but yeah, again, listeners should let us know if I'm totally wrong. Yeah. Okay. So what about you? What would you give yourself on out of 10 rating today? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think I'm a bit the same. I had a good sleep last night.
Beautiful.
I went for a walk in the sun and got some vitamin D in my eyeballs. So I'm an 8.5 nice. Or a 9. I'm feeling pretty good.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
do you have cause for applause today?
I do.
Yeah.
I have 2.
Oh, okay. That's
one is
great.
I did a Tai Chi class last Friday, which was awesome.
Nice.
I did Tai Chi when I was really young and learned a whole series. And I haven't
Mm-hmm.
done it since. And that's when I was like a teenager. And
Right.
oh my gosh, I loved it. Spent like a whole hour learning like one move. And it reminded
Mm.
me um how important it is to slow down, which
Right.
almost sounds silly because we know this, but I mean, actually trying to move my body as slow as the instructor, just to even take a step, which takes like 20 seconds to take one step.
Right.
I couldn't go as slow as the instructor. And I believe that your brain and your body like are totally connected. We don't say, oh,
Sure.
the kidney body connection or the liver body connection, right? Like,
Mm.
why do we say the
Mm-hmm.
brain body connection? Like, we're one unit.
Yeah.
And so when you're off balance in your body, it's usually an indication that you're off balance in your thoughts. So like those
Mm-hmm.
the days when you like run into the coffee table or trip on a leaf
Right.
on the right. And so it was so interesting me to do these really slow movements, and I couldn't get my body to do the movements as slow as hers.
Mm.
Reminded me that maybe I need to have more time slowing down or doing some more meditation time, like you were talking about,
Right.
because
Right. Right. Right.
I'm focusing so hard on trying to slow my body down that I want to make it a habit to slow my body down. So I'm really excited to continue with this Tai Chi journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it also was like I couldn't focus on anything else. So it was a really great way to just be completely present in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It was super cool. So I'm proud of myself for doing that and for my aha moments. But my other thing is, and these guys totally aren't sponsors of ours or anything. So I'm giving a shout out to Knix, Knix, which is a Canadian female owned underwear and bra company. I got my first Knix bra and I'm obsessed.
Oh,
I went
nice.
to the store, I got measured. I'm wearing the right kind of bra now. I'm so happy. It's comfortable. I feel supported. So that's my second cause for applause is I have a bra that fits.
Oh
Yay.
my gosh, I'm so jealous. I'm using a lot of like old bras lately, some stretched out ones. Some one of my bras isn't even a bra, it's just like it's it's a dress, or it used to be a dress. But the skirt got ripped one time when I was like out, but it was like a structured enough dress that I just cut like the bra part out, and I still wear it as a bra. Like it's
Okay,
not...
amazing. But I think you and I are going to take a trip to Knix together at some point.
Yeah, perhaps. That's so funny. Yeah, and actually, yeah, it kind of relates to my cause
Yeah,
for
what's your cause
applause.
for applause?
Yeah. Mine is that I've been looking at building my pie chart of coping mechanisms, I guess is kind of the best way to talk about it. So when I first gave up binge eating, it was really tough because it was kind of like the one thing I really let myself enjoy. And it was like this way I relieved stress and found a lot of excitement in life. And when I was bored, it was like a way to kind of cope with that. And when you first start treating things like this, it's so tempting to be like, well, I'm just going to stop that behavior. Like that's just going to be what happens. But how do you actually stop it without just like, oh, all this willpower, right? So a big part of it is to like to give yourself like a pie chart of things that make you feel better. So I've been building them up like the meditation, like walking the dog, like staying up a little bit later to do my own nails. I'm doing that a lot more lately. And then one of them, I used to kind of only use music when I like really needed it, like for like a drive or getting ready to go somewhere. But to just listen to music while I'm at home by myself or like home with my partner, like wasn't really something I was prioritizing. But the more I prioritize it, the more it's taking up in my pie chart, and I'm liking that. So now, even within that slice, I'm breaking it up into like new music and music I really like. And this morning, I've really been going down a bit of a nostalgia kind of vibe. So I picked a very slow Spice Girls song after my meditation because I wanted to
Yes,
like kind of
Spice
like
Girls.
get into my day. And it just like reminded me of like being 10 years old and listening to this album and like again, like back when you actually listened to the full album, you know, like
Yeah. And the album was a journey, right? Like
totally. Yeah. So my cause for applause is that like music is always there for you. And I think I neglected to use it just because, again, I almost wanted it to always be special. And I was worried that if I listened to music every day, it would be less special. But now I'm letting myself have that again, and it makes me happy. So that's my cause for applause.
I have like goosebumps for that. Like music is special, but it doesn't need to be reserved for super special. It's just always special.
Yeah.
And it can like it never loses its specialness, I guess. Like that's wow, that's so cool. I can ask a curious question.
Yeah.
So the pie chart, do you like actually draw out a pie chart for yourself, or are you using that as an analogy?
I've done both. Like I when I first did the exercise, I could only think of like 2 or 3 things that weren't binge eating that I was like, this is what I enjoy to do with my time. But like lately it's now just kind of in my head as something that I'm like, oh, I gotta improve my slices. I gotta give more variety to my slices. I've gotta, because, you know, this is kind of cliche too, but like this idea that like if you have all of your eggs in one basket or all of your joy in one slice, when that slice goes away, you feel really untethered again and you have like nothing. Versus if like one of these slices goes away, like let's say I can't stay up late and do my nails because I have to work the next morning, but I could listen to a few songs I really like, or I could do a meditation, or I could write, or I could do art, or like any of these other things, or like yeah, you just have to make sure you have a lot of variety built in so that, and then maybe this is a pessimistic way of looking at it, but like if one of those things goes away, you still have something to enjoy.
I don't think that's pessimistic at all. I think that's practicing abundance.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to practice abundance. Okay. I'm going to go on a little tangent here. We're going to get to our stories, everybody. But
yeah.
So I don't know if I've mentioned this in one of our podcasts before or not, but I started doing like research on scientific studies about practicing gratitude.
Okay.
A while ago, like just reading some journal studies and things like that. And I discovered that there is a difference between gratitude practice and abundance practice. What we do on this podcast is a letting go practice. They're all equally important. But what I discovered is, I mean, I didn't discover it, everybody, but what I read about was what we've been calling a gratitude practice is actually an abundance practice. And if you label it a gratitude practice, it can actually make you feel worse. So an abundance practice is when you list all of the things that you have and all of the things that add value to your life, or the things that I'm using air quotations here, grateful for or thankful for that you have in your life. That's actually an abundance practice. The piece that we're missing is the gratitude practice. And gratitude is actually outward. Gratitude is about being of service and giving outward. So what studies found is that people that practice abundance but called it gratitude and didn't practice gratitude actually ended up feeling worse about themselves, because once you start doing your list of all the things that you have, you then start thinking about all the things you don't have. So when you do an abundance practice, right? And this is what like a lot of the gurus out there saying, or whatever, just list all the things you're grateful for. But when they actually did brain scans and check-ins on people's emotions and moods who followed a gratitude practice, and or what they called, you know, what's been called the gratitude practice, which is actually abundance. If you get too far down the rabbit hole, you start feeling worse about yourself. So when you do a gratitude practice, which is actually abundance, you have to follow it up with a true gratitude practice, which is giving your energy outward. So you practice your abundance. Here's all the things that I'm thankful for that make my life abundant, that get my mind frame out of a place of scarcity, that I'm grateful and thankful that I have. You should follow that up with a gratitude practice, which is energy outward. How can I be of service to someone? And it could be as simple as visualizing a person, place, because I think we can give to nature and the environment, for example, a person, place, or even an animal, a pet. Just it can be as simple as visualizing them in your mind and imagining you're sending them energy and saying to them a compliment or to help them feel how you would like them to feel, to help them feel loved. It can be as simple as visualizing it and all the way up to actually like taking action, right? So calling that person and telling them why you appreciate them, emailing them, telling them why you appreciate them, writing a letter in snail mail. Hugging is a form of true gratitude, giving someone a hug because you're giving them like some physical comfort. Paying it forward is true gratitude, right? So gratitude is outside of you. It's about giving to other people. And that actually is more satisfying and lights up the parts of our brain that help us with self-confidence and feeling good about ourselves more than the abundance practice, which is what we've been calling gratitude.
Okay.
Mind-blowing, right?
Right.
So everybody out there that's like, yeah, just list all the things I'm grateful for. If you've been doing it for like a month, 6 months, a year, does it work? Does it make you feel better about yourself? And for some people, it probably does, right? I mean, we might get a lot of comments here about it after, I don't know. But when I learned that, I was like, that makes so much sense because just listing all the things I have doesn't make me feel better about myself. It can help me get out of a mind frame of scarcity and help me realize that I have a lot of supports in my life and tools and resources in my life, but it doesn't actually make me feel a serotonin or oxytocin boost, which is what makes us feel good about ourselves. Practicing true gratitude does, which is an outward practice. Mind blowing. When I learned that, I was like, whoa, whoa. Anyways, that was my tangent. Back to the podcast, everyone. I think you're first.
I think so as well. So it was interesting that I brought up, I'm going to call myself interesting. It was interesting that I brought up the Spice Girls.
I love listening to you.
Because today my regret is about a trap that I think a lot of young women fall into. But yeah, definitely related to turning my back on my favorite music from my childhood. It's definitely related to this as well. So I'm just going to get started.
Good. I'm excited to hear this one.
Okay.
I'm all ears.
All right. I have an experience I need to let go of to move forward. I regret being one of the guys. I feel this is almost cliche now, but I held pride in being so over the drama of having female friends. I cringe at the times I sought out male professors and bosses over female ones. The consequences I'm missing out on due to holding on to this regret are that I do not have practice with female friendships. I'm getting better. It's fun. Like even just earlier, we were talking about going bra shopping. So like, that's kind of fun to me. As new connections try to get closer, I tend to keep them at a comfortable distance, a distance where I see my role in the friendship as a helpful cheerleader and less as a real person. When I think back to this time, it's really understandable that I gravitated towards the guys in my life. I was definitely being bullied by a lot of younger women. And I also didn't fit the stereotypical like girl mold. So I think I did everything I knew to be right at the time with the tools I had, and that's okay. It was a natural reaction to the environment I was living in, one that reduced women to two categories, either a really fun, outgoing, like, I don't want to use the word slut, but I used it here in my letter, so I'm just going to keep it, or a cold bitch. By claiming I was not like the other girls, I was saying that I didn't want to be categorized. I did not understand the spectrum of female experience. That is who I was then, and I've grown in so many ways. I'm still a little angry, but mostly relieved because I'm capable of seeing people as individuals and seeking a more authentic connection. as well, I'm worthy of dropping my helper persona and turning some of that energy inwards towards myself.
Wow.
I find like some of my regrets are getting like kind of repetitive because they're all kind of related to this like one idea, but
that's everything is connected. The human experience, everything is connected, right? So
yeah,
that's not repetitive at all. And I think that's the point of us. We're telling stories. And I think people can relate to our stories because that's one that I definitely relate to. I think a lot of listeners out there can relate to. So do you want feedback or do you want to just be
yeah.
I relate to that too. And it's a really interesting conversation in terms of that females can have male preconceived biases. I don't know if I'm wording this right, but
yeah,
just because we're females doesn't mean that our brains haven't absorbed the cultural biases against women. And we need to be wary of our preconditioning and biases against women as well.
Oh, big time.
And you said two of them right there, right? Like the fun slut versus the cold bitch. And there's nowhere for anyone else to kind of fit in. And I think it's amazing that you said you're challenging those preconditioned biases that you have now and finding diversity in female friendships and finding empowerment and seeing value in female friendships. Whereas wherever you were in that part of your life when you thought I can't be friends with women, females, girls, whatever age group it was, it shows that you've changed on your journey and you become more aware. Right. And I want to point that out. And then at the end, you said, like, I'm still kind of angry about it. That's the point of this podcast. Don't be angry at yourself about it. Right. Like, just let it out. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To clarify, I'm not necessarily angry at myself. I'm just angry at this, like, it's just this sickness that we keep falling into where like being one of the guys means you're somehow better. Like you're somehow better than the other women. Like,
bias.
And it's like, what, like, where does it come from? Yeah. Is it something we can actually fight? Because even like I was the perfect age for the Spice Girls. You know what I mean? Like their biggest impact on pop culture, I was aged 8 to 13. So like that should have been a sign that like girl power, so good, wonderful. And I only had that with my one other female friend, but she was my neighborhood friend. She wasn't a friend at school. And I didn't have a lot of friends at school. And so it became easier to hang out with the boys at school because we had similar interests. Like I liked biking and I liked hiking and I liked, finding weird things in the forest. Like,
and then what did you label yourself, or what did parents label you as, or other people label you as?
Like I was definitely like a smart tomboy, right?
Right.
Like
tomboy.
Yeah.
Why do we have to name ourselves boy, right?
Yeah.
Instead
and
of
and it's embarrassing, like not just for me, but just for like everyone. That's where more my anger is placed. It's not at myself because I have grown and I learned that I do like having female friendships and we can talk about things that I can't talk about with my male friends, which I do enjoy. And I think there's still like a small portion of me that's still like, oh, but I'm like the best of the women. like in the lives of the men around me, I still have this, like, because I get how it is to be a guy. So, I'm the one they come to.
Can I suggest a shift?
Yeah, for sure.
I get what it's like to be a human being.
Totally.
Regardless of your gender identification. It's about, and you do, Shadoe, you're very empathetic and compassionate and willing to hear the stories. Like you're a really good listener and processor. Like you get what it's like to be a human being.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
Right. So there's a shift, like to just get rid of that word I get what it's like to be a man versus a woman. And I'm not saying there's not differences between men and women, everybody.
Of
There
course,
are,
yeah.
or the genders or whatever. I'm just saying we share more. If we look at things in terms of our human experience, we have more in common than we do apart. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I think it was partly an identity thing, because like when we're young, we're just like striving to find our place.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think maybe this is like a generalization, but I think almost all women do go through this process of like, I'm not like the other girls.
Yeah, I did too.
Because the other girls are one or the other, and I'm neither of those things. So clearly I'm not a girl.
So we just didn't put in the label though, in that label where there was only 2 or 3 identities that women could have, that girls could have when we were growing up. Yeah. I hope that it's different now. I think that it is. But when we were growing up, it was like, here's the female identities that you can identify with. Right. You could be flirty and fun, or you could be, what did you say? A cold bitch,
bitch. Yeah.
Boring,
totally.
And smart, or you could be a tomboy.
Yeah.
Right. Like there wasn't, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Like there wasn't a lot else. And I hope there is now, but I think, we opened a can of worms, and I love this can of worms.
Yeah, for sure.
And we'll talk about it on so many podcasts, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The preconditioned male bias. Right. But I love what you opened, is that women need to be aware of their preconditioned male bias as well.
Yeah. I mean, it followed me, I think, all the way to like the end of my 20s. Like I was going to say the end of university, but I think even when I first got out of university, I would be like, well, and I was working in the government, so I kind of knew the different areas, and I would always be kind of like, oh, well, I'm not going to apply to that person's team. Like, don't you know, she's a pretty big bitch over there. But like, and it was like always like I was always looking for like a male superior. That was misguided in lots of ways.
Well, it's totally misguided, and it's still happening, as we know it's still happening, right? Women in leadership roles are bitches and totally not worth it. And men are what we aspire to be. And women get mislabeled, discriminated against, ostracized. I mean, like for no reason.
Yeah.
Other than male preconditioned bias. Right.
Well, and you know what? I won't say that it's no reason. I do think sometimes at certain levels of executive suite, in order to be a female who succeeds in that kind of role, you do have to adopt a bit of a personality that I still think is not great. Like I still
think, but it's not fair that you have to adopt that personality in order to, it's not fair. You have to adopt that personality.
And I would say the same thing about the men who are in those roles. So like, it's just, I just want more compassion and genuine caring all over the place. And I know that I can't be the only one. And I know that for a long time, I was so aware of that hurt in our society that I really took it on. Like I really took on this role of like, I'm going to be sweet to you. I'm going to be caring. I'm going to be helpful. And lots of times, even in my relationships with female friends, I would do that. I said that in my letter too. Like, I didn't feel worthy of a female friend for a while. So it kind of became this thing where like, I could at least be that for them. And then that would be how I snuck in to a group of women.
Interesting. Interesting. Can I ask one other question?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You said it's embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
What are you embarrassed about?
It's less that I'm personally embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for society.
Okay.
Like on behalf
That's what I thought you were saying.
I'm embarrassed on behalf of like this binary that we've set up and that people still fall into, and that like we can say that looks don't matter until we're blue in the face, but like it does. And it's not just looks, it's like in terms of like looking good or looking ugly, it's like looking like an identity so that I know where to place you in my mind, I guess. And it's something that like some people are aware that they do it And I think some people like aren't even aware that they do it,
Yeah.
like,
I mean, it's conditioning, programming,
yeah.
deprogramming, all those things, societal, cultural, all those things. But something that's like given me relief, I guess, is I used to like when all of this kind of started, Me Too, everything else, and then cancel culture. Now we're kind of questioning a little bit of cancel culture. Is the human experience is complex. And we really need to acknowledge that everybody leads a complex life, has complex thoughts, has complex situations. It's not black and white. It's really in the gray zone or whatever you want to call it, but it's complex. And we need to have empathy and compassion towards the complexity. And in particular, towards ourselves, right?
Oh,
like
for
I
sure.
used to behave this way in the past and I've learned more and I've changed, or that was complex, like that I acted out in that way or whatever, but I was going through something very complex at the time. So I just say that to myself sometimes when I find myself judging, or I find like in my head, or I find myself, feeling like I don't know how to think about this because I see both sides of the coin. Just acknowledging it's complex, and it gets rid of the fear for me, because I think I have fear of being judged sometimes if I take a stance one way or another on something.
Oh, for sure.
But to acknowledge that it's complex, and if you acknowledge the complexity, then you can say, I see. I don't know. Yeah. I'm rambling now, but
no,
what
that's okay. I have a
like,
little pretty bow to put on that ramble.
Okay, good.
On the a couple weeks ago, I was kind of joking around with my husband, and I said, I think I'm reconsidering my position on fence sitting.
That's awesome. I love it.
He was like, the brain recoils at that statement.
Yeah.
Because like
amazing.
I used to also be like, no, it's this way or that way. And however way you feel is your value as a human being and all this stuff. And I'm becoming a lot more open to this like middle ground, which I used to kind of be like, well, that means that person's a flip-flopper. And like that was also a moral judgment. But the more I'm becoming comfortable on the fence, the more I'm like, okay, this is actually not that bad. And the people who want me to choose a side want to ascribe a value to me, which I don't want to give them. So
yeah. All I can say is yep.
Yes. Do you have anything else on a regret about being one of the guys or favoring male? I always thank you for what you bring up. This is why I love having you as a friend, because we have different thoughts and similar thoughts. We have diversity and complexity in our friendship, but for sure,
just thank you, because I totally connected to it. I was like that for a while too. Around the age 13, 14, I was getting bullied by the girls, hanging out with the boys, like, and I think you're right. I think a lot of us have had that experience because we didn't want to be put into one of the three boxes that adolescent teenage girls or girls in their 20s are put into. And so thank you. And thank you for giving listeners permission to say, yep, that's what happened, but that's not the box that I'm in now.
Right. Well, thank you. Well, and thank you as a sentence. So I'm going to stop there. That's right. Ask for you to share.
Okay. So, mine kind of connects, I guess, a little bit, because we kind of got into the talk about womanhood, but and preconditioned biases and how we judge ourselves, I guess. So mine is about advocating for my mental health.
Okay.
Which I've talked a little bit about before, but here we go.
Okay, great.
So I have an experience that I want to let go of in order to move forward. Here it is. When I first started experiencing mental health issues, anxiety, depression, panic from being in a workplace that was toxic for me, I didn't know what to do. And I continued to judge myself with the preconditioned biases, that are out there and the stigma that is out there around mental health. And I left it for far too long before I got help. So my regret is not advocating for myself. And my other regret is not advocating more. My workplace did try to help me, but I realized that they were too deep into the stigmatization of mental health in terms of the culture. In terms of the policies that existed, they were great policies, but in terms of the actual change in culture, it wasn't there. And I wish that I'd advocated for myself more instead of sinking into myself and believing that I was weak and believing the judgments I was judging on myself and the judgments I was hearing from other people, instead of acknowledging I have anxiety, I have depression, and this is part of the disease. So the consequences of holding on to this warrior regret are healing or not healing. So I release this kind of regret of not advocating for myself. It's one of the things that keeps me up at night, in knowing that I'm advocating for myself now. And I'm advocating for mental health issues and emotional health issues now in the life coaching I do and the workshops I held, in this podcast, and just talking about real experiences and strategies and how we can support each other to stop the stigma around mental health issues. So I do need to let go of this kind of guilt that I have or regret, because sometimes I think of situations that happened and I cringe. And I think, oh man, I tried to call somebody out and then they said to me, well, that wasn't me. And I said, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't. Right. Or things like that. I would kind of step back on my standing up for myself. And I need to let go of that and acknowledge the good work that I'm doing now. So I did everything that I could in the moment with the tools that I had at the time. And that's okay, because I was still really struggling to figure out what tools, strategies, resources I could use to make myself feel better. I was still healing, and I'm still healing because we're always on a healing path, but I wasn't in a place at that point where I was healed enough or understood or had enough self-awareness to advocate for myself. So I have to remember that I was a different person then than I am now. Instead of looking back and thinking I should have done this, well, if I was the person I am now back then, maybe I would have had the strength to do those things, but there's no point in me regretting it now because I didn't have the strength then. That's who I was then, and I've grown and healed since then. And I'm now on a better journey and a better path to self-awareness because I have support, tools, and strategies around me that I've discovered and created for myself and my life. And I am worthy of support. And that's it.
You are worthy of support, and you are worthy in so many ways. Thank you for sharing. Did you want to talk about this one, or did you want to just kind of share it and put it out there in the world?
We can talk about it a little bit.
Okay. Great. So again, thank you for sharing. Something that two things really struck out to me. One was this idea that like walking the talk, right? Like there's all these great policies in place, but if the culture can't support it, how good is that policy? And how is it just like to make everything look good, or is it a step towards addressing the stigma?
Do you mean is the policy a step towards addressing the stigma?
Yeah. Like, should we even do the policies if they're not going to be enacted, or are the policies the gateway to like getting things fixed?
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think the policies need to be in place so that people can say this happened to me, and that there can be consequences. Like this person did this to me and they broke this policy, so they need to be, punished or taught or whatever on paper. But what I think the problem is that we create these policies and think they're great, or workplaces do. I'm not going to say workplaces do, but then there's no further action beyond that. They think the policy is the be all and end all. And I think the policy is the first step of many steps, not two steps.
Yeah.
Like 10 steps.
Totally.
And we're like, oh, well, we have this policy. We can always fall back on it. If anybody asks, if there's a lawsuit, if there's a lawsuit involved or if whatever, we can just say, well, this is our policy and let me print it off and give it to you. And it ends there. And it needs to be the first step.
Right.
In changing culture, not the only step.
I think that's definitely a good thing to think about. Because I also think about like, how does this change, not necessarily just mental health, but like I'm thinking about COVID health. And as we move into this idea that like, oh, the pandemic is over, even though it's not, and people are going to start changing their policies around like working from home and coming into the office and things like that, I worry that the policy will again be like the only step. It'll be like, oh, well, we have a COVID friendly policy that everyone knows about. Like you can't come into the office if you think you have COVID. But then if at the end of the day, like everyone's short staffed and they know that like they have to come in, even if they are struggling with COVID symptoms, like you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I'm starting to think about what is a policy now? And maybe that's a grander question.
Well, I think the topic that you're kind of bringing up is, and we all have to find our own balance in it so that we can, I'm laughing because it's ironic almost, so that we can prevent regret and guilt in our lives or those sorts of things. Is what's the balance of my personal responsibility to myself and the responsibility of the communities around me to me.
Totally.
So what's the responsibility of my personal responsibility of myself, looking back on how I didn't advocate for my mental health enough, which obviously partially led to, I had a total breakdown in 2014, as many of you know, and I had to heal myself. And that's when I left my job and started thinking about my business, but took years and years of healing. What's the personal responsibility that I had to look after myself versus what was the responsibility of the company that I was working for that had to help me? I don't know the answer. There has to be a balance of both.
Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't 100% their fault and it wasn't 100% my fault.
Right. But I think really the soundbite from this episode is that policies are not the only step. They're one step.
There's something on paper, like they're a tangible thing on paper. But what we're really talking about here, when it comes to anything that the world wants to see change, we want to see changes in diversity, the way skin color is treated, the way women are treated, the way mental health is treated. There's a lot going on in the way COVID is treated. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a difference between what's on paper and what's actually happening. And for most of us, we're not living on what's the piece of paper. We're living in a real world and experiencing complex things every day. And I don't know the answer of where the responsibility lies, or maybe responsibility is not the right word. However, I feel moved to advocate for both, to teach about your personal responsibility, which is what this podcast is about. Like, let's learn something, a structure, a strategy we can do for ourselves. Or even if your process is just listening to this podcast, maybe that is part of your letting go, because you can be like, yep, I relate to that story. I feel better now that I've heard somebody else tell a similar story, right? What are the things we can do for ourselves? And when you're ready, how can you be of service and advocate for change?
For sure. Ways? Yeah. When you're ready part is so important, because you touched on two things. You said that environment was toxic for you specifically, like for you, which I know there's lots of people
that work in that company and love it, and they love their jobs.
Yeah. And then you also talked about cringing upon thinking about stuff you didn't do, which is, I don't want to say this is a cliche, but you kind of hear that a lot. It's like, when you look back on your life, you're going to regret the things you didn't do more than the things you've done. And like, I don't know. Like for me, I don't know if it's just because like I'm such a clumsy over speaker or oversharer, and I talk about the unspoken things, like in a workplace culture. Like I would be like, oh, it's weird that we have this policy because like this is what I see, and it'd be like, oh, shush, we don't talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, we don't talk about that. Like that's you know, and it's like, but you know, so for me, I regret speaking up and you're regretting not speaking up. But like it again, it's bizarre to me because like I don't know if we're ever going to find the solution, other than like leaders going to all these conferences where they get told this stuff over and over and over again. Like I've definitely heard the idiom like culture eats strategy for breakfast, more than once. But what does that actually mean? And how do we actually improve people's lives? Like, I don't know.
I'd really like to know, listeners, what you think. So again, write us comments on Instagram. You can email us. But I think what's interesting, what you're saying is, I think the core of it is fear of judgment. There was a fear of judgment in those moments. And is that a personal responsibility again, or a community responsibility? I think it's both. The personal responsibility is to learn how to not care what other people think of you, which is a really hard skill. But the community responsibility is to create safe places where people aren't afraid to speak their truth, be themselves, and aren't afraid of being judged and ostracized. So this is where we are now. I don't know. I wish I knew the answer. I wish there was a magic pill. I wish there was something, right? But there's not. But I do think I do have hope. And I do think that, I mean, even if one person listens to this episode,
right,
and is like, yep, that makes sense, and then talks to another person and is like, I'll listen to this podcast and it made me think about this. You know, I believe change comes from the top up and the top down, and the bottom up.
Yeah.
And for years, I worked in the top positions. I dabbled in politics for a bit when I was younger in creating that top down change. And then something inside me shifted where I realized I wanted to do the bottom up change, and that's okay. And you can do both. But for me, I really believe in the ripple effect, or here's the analogy that I like to give is, you know, you're flying a plane. And if you change the trajectory of your flight plan by just 1 degree, that adds up over the course of your flight, and that plane's going to land somewhere completely different. Right. So that's another way of saying the ripple effect is that all the ripples add up to a bigger wave, or just that 1 degree or 1% change adds up to actually massive impact. And I really believe in small and slow solutions. So that's my hope. Right. And that's my hope, and that's my intention. And I know it is for you too, Shadoe, without putting words in your mouth. Like,
no, that's okay.
With every project that you do and every project I do, and this project we're doing together is how do we create change from the bottom up? And I believe, I mean, I have to, or else I'll just be sitting in fear and worry. But I, as a person living with anxiety, but like I have to believe. And I do believe, not that I have to, but I also actually genuinely do believe that we just need to keep talking. We need to keep talking. Yeah.
Yeah. I watched the movie Bombshell last night, and I hadn't seen it before, but it was recently added to Netflix. And yeah, there was like a scene too, where like one of the older characters is talking about how like she knew what was going on, but she couldn't really say anything because then her career would be on the line. And one of the younger people was like, yeah, but then what about all of us? Like, what about all the other people who got damaged by you not speaking up? And I thought that was kind of unfair of the younger character. I thought the younger character was able to like say that because they didn't have as much of a career on the line, I guess. And it's just like, again, in an ideal world, like you're saying, personal responsibility and community responsibility. but again, I don't have an answer. I just think it's
complex.
Once you have more stakes, it's harder to actually implement change, because you've been able to like thrive. Like you're saying, some people are able to thrive in these environments. So then it's really scary to think about changing that kind of environment when that environment has provided for you.
I would say it's really scary to think about sacrificing yourself for change in that environment. Right. And that's a big commitment to sacrifice yourself if there's a lot of fear of negative consequences.
For sure.
We can always surprise ourselves that there could be positive consequences as well. People can be surprising.
Oh, totally. And I think when I was young, it's weird because when I was younger, I had very little fear about that. And even on the employee survey, when it would ask that question, like, I feel confident to say what I think without fear of reprisal. That's a very common question on employee surveys. And I thought it was such a silly question, because I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, of course I speak my mind. And I didn't think about it as like me personally versus like, again, kind of relating to another episode we did, like, I love talking in groups. I love I love talking to myself. So
I love talking to my plants.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's, to me, I thought it was so silly, but I could see that, like, let's say I was an established career person, it would have been more difficult. It would have been more difficult to speak up. So I don't know. And then, like, not only is it more difficult, because then you have more gravitas to actually change it. Like, it's weird. Like, the more influence you have, the harder it is to actually change things.
Yeah, it's as I'm just going to add in, potentially as a woman.
Sure.
The more influence you have, the harder it is changing as a woman. But it's complex. It's complex. But I do have to say, I do feel like a little relieved today, saying, yep, I need to not judge myself for who I was then and know that I'm doing good work now. And I hope that that helps anybody else out there that's feeling the same way.
No, that's great.
And open about, I'm a person living with anxiety. I'm a person living with seasonal affective disorder. I'm a person that has bouts of depression, and I'm not just managing, I'm thriving right now because I've learned what works for me in my healing journey. And so letting go of those cringy memories that I have, or those cringy feelings about that I wasn't strong enough then, is helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Coolio. Well, should we do our wrap up?
Let's do our wrap up. All right. If you want to come and do 3 breaths of letting go with me, as long as you're in a safe space, I invite you to come to the front edge of your chair. Put your feet on the ground. Feel your heels and your toes on the ground, and know that the earth is always supporting you. The gravity is always supporting you. Put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And on this first breath, say to yourself, I release pressure and expectations. And on the second breath, say to yourself, I relieve my regrets. My past does not define me. And on this last breath, say to yourself, I'm excited to move forward with peace and joy and confidence. Thank you, everybody, for listening in today. We look forward to seeing you next time, to speaking with you next time. And we appreciate you so much. As part of my abundance practice, I'm so thankful for all of our listeners out there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
This episode of Let's Relieve Regret was produced by Shadoe and Victoria Muir-Garcia.
Editing by me, Victoria Mira-Burcia.
We are an independent podcast supported by you, our listeners.
If you think this podcast sends a valuable message, you had an aha moment, or learned something new about yourself, help us realize our goal of reaching as many listeners as possible.
We encourage you to take action and support us right now by choosing one of the following options.
You can easily support us by
following us on Instagram at relieve.regret.
Tell 2 friends.
Leave a 5-star review on whatever app you're listening to us on.
Leave a tip at coffee.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast. That's ko-fi.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast.
Join our conversations in the Facebook group, Let's Relieve Regret Podcast.
Find all this information, all the links, and more in the podcast notes. Okay, bye.
Bye.